Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to picture the turn of the millennium. It's roughly 2001. The dot-com bubble is bursting. Y2K turned out to be a whole lot of nothing. And the business world is in this weird, jittery transition state. Now, zoom in on the motorcycle industry. On one side of the ring, you have an absolute American legend.
The heavyweight champion.
Exactly. It's celebrating nearly 100 years of dominance. It's loud, it's proud, it's heavy metal. People literally tattoo its logo on their bodies. That is, of course, Harley Davidson.
A brand that, at the time, was practically printing money. I mean, they weren't just selling motorcycles, they were selling a membership to a tribe.
Right. But then in the other corner, you have the Challenger, an Italian icon. It's sexy, it's red, it's fast, it wins races on Sunday. But financially, it was a disaster. Just a few years prior, in 1996, Ducati was basically staring into the abyss.
It's a classic great product, broken business scenario. And that really sets the stage for the deep dive we're doing today. We're looking at a fascinating business case study of Ducati versus Harley Davidson, specifically zooming in on that critical window between, say, 1996 and 2002.
And the mission here is to figure out how these two companies took two completely different roads to success.
No.
We're talking about Ducati pulling off a radical turnaround by virtually reinventing what it means to be a manufacturer, outsourcing almost everything, and betting the house on the early internet.
While Harley Davidson did the exact opposite, they just doubled down on heritage, emotion, and keeping things offline.
It's a study in contrasts. We've got the financial data, interviews with the CEOs at the time, Federico Manoli of Ducati and Jeffrey Bluestein of Harley, and some really detailed operational diagrams from the era. But the buzzword I kept seeing in the research was value network.
And that's a crucial concept. We're going to look at the shift from a traditional supply chain to a value network.
Which sounds fancy, but by the end of this, I want to know if it actually translates to selling more bikes or if it's just, consultant speak. But let's start with the drama. The crisis. You mentioned Ducati was in trouble in 96. How bad was it?
It was dire. Carlo Di Biagio, the CEO of Ducati Motor Holding, he didn't mince words. He said the situation in 1996 was not so far removed from bankruptcy. The parent company, Cagiva, was in a financial crisis. Ducati had the name, they had the World Superbike Championships, but they had zero cash flow.
They were winning trophies, but couldn't pay the light bill.
Essentially, efficiency was low, costs were high, they were struggling to get parts. It was just a mess.
So enter the White Knights. Texas Pacific Group, or TPG, buys a 51% stake. Now, usually when private equity comes in, I expect a horror story. Asset stripping, layoffs, cutting quality to boost margins. But Ducati did something weird. They decided to stop making motorcycles.
Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you're not far off. They made a controversial decision to pivot away from manufacturing as their core identity. They looked at the bike and asked a really hard existential question. What actually creates value for the rider?
And I'm guessing the answer wasn't who welded the frame or who cast the forks.
Precisely. They identified three core competencies that they had to keep in-house. First, R&D and design, the brain of the bike. Second, assembly, the hands that put it together and ensure quality. And third, marketing the voice.
So the brain, the hands, and the voice, and everything else.
Everything else was up for negotiation. By 2001, Ducati had outsourced 90% of its production.
90%. That is a staggering number.
Yeah.
If I'm a purist and I go out and drop 20 grand on a Ducati, am I basically buying a bike made by a committee of random vendors?
That's the risk, right? Diluting the brand. But think of it less like a factory and more like an orchestra. Ducati became the conductor, they composed the music, they set the tempo, they held the baton, but they didn't play every instrument themselves.
They moved from a vertical integration model, where you own the mines and the mills, to a platform strategy.
Exactly. To save money and complexity, they standardized the bones of the bikes. Almost all their models shared the same L-shaped twin-cylinder engine configuration and the tubular trestle frame.
So the skeleton is the same, but the outfit changes.
In a way. They standardized the invisible parts so they could put their money into the parts you see, feel, and experience. And this brings us back to that value network concept. They didn't just treat suppliers as vendors where they'd say, here's a blueprint, make this cheap, goodbye.
Right. The sources mention an insourcing, outsourcing decision matrix, which I assume is a grid they use to decide what to keep and what to toss.
It's a simple 2x2 grid. On one axis, you have customer value. How much does the rider care about this specific part? On the other, relative strength. Are we better at making this than anyone else in the world?
Okay, let's play this out. The engine design.
High customer value. It's the heart of a Ducati. And Ducati's the best in the world at their specific desmodromic valve engine. So you keep that in-house. High value, high strength.
What about the suspension, the forks?
High customer value riders care about handling. But is Ducati a better suspension manufacturer than Erlins or Showa? Companies that do nothing but make suspension all day long? No.
So you outsource it?
You partner. You bring the supplier into the design process. That's the network part. You integrate them so deeply that they're practically part of the company.
So instead of a factory, they became a hub, a coordinator of excellence.
Yes, it allowed them to be incredibly flexible. But there was another huge problem they had to fix. It wasn't just who made the parts, it was how long it took to actually build a bike.
This is the part of the case study that actually blew my mind. The 37 days to 2 days miracle.
It really was a miracle of logistics.
So, just to set the stakes, before this turnaround, it took 37 days to build a bike. That's over a month. If I order a bike in March for the riding season, and it takes 37 days just to assemble plus shipping, I'm riding in July.
And that destroys sales. It also ties up millions of dollars in inventory unfinished bikes sitting around waiting for parts.
So how do you shave 35 days off a process? Did they just whip the workers harder?
No, this wasn't about working harder. It was about the Ducati improvement process, or DIP. They borrowed heavily from Japanese manufacturing philosophies like Kaizen. The biggest shift was moving from a push system to a pull system.
Okay, push versus pull. Break that down for someone who has never set foot in a factory.
Imagine a bakery. A push system is like a baker who just keeps baking loaves of bread because the oven is hot. He bakes 50 loaves of sourdough, then 50 baguettes, regardless of whether there are customers in the shop. You end up with piles of stale bread everywhere.
And in a motorcycle factory, that's piles of engines waiting for frames.
Exactly. It creates bottlenecks. A pull system, or Kanban, is like a made-to-order sandwich shop. You don't make the sandwich until the customer orders it. In the factory, they put boxes of parts next to the assembly line. When a box is empty, that empty box is a signal, a literal card or electronic ping to the warehouse to bring exactly one more box.
So nothing moves until it is needed.
Correct. It's synchronized. They also moved to one-piece flow. Instead of batching things, making 50 engines, then 50 frames, they focused on flowing one single bike from start to finish continuously.
And the result was that production time dropped from that sluggish 37 days down to just 2 days.
From a month and a week to a weekend.
That is incredible speed. And the case study mentions Harley was doing something similar, right? They weren't just sitting on their hands polishing chrome.
No, Harley Davidson also had a massive supply chain overhaul starting in 1996. They cut their supplier base from 4,000 down to 800. They were heavy users of EDI, electronic data interchange, to get paper out of the system.
But the vibe feels different. Ducati felt like they were stripping the car down to make a Formula One racer, while Harley was just tightening the bolts on a tank.
That's a fair analogy. Harley was optimizing a traditional model. Ducati was reinventing the model. And that brings us to the brand strategy. Because efficient factories are great, but they don't sell bikes if nobody wants them. And these two companies were selling two completely different things.
Right. Harley Davidson. Sell the lifestyle. I have to read this quote from the source material again because it's just peak branding. It is one thing for people to buy your products. It's another for them to tattoo your name on their bodies.
It speaks to the level of loyalty they commanded. Harley wasn't selling transportation. They were selling freedom. They were selling membership in a tribe.
But who was in that tribe? The data says the median age was 45.
And getting older. They were capitalizing on the rise of the RUB.
It's a rub.
RUB, rich urban biker.
Ah, okay.
Think doctors, lawyers, CEOs, people who had the disposable income to buy a heavy, expensive cruiser and all the leather accessories to go with it.
The weekend warriors. They put on the costume on Saturday, ride to a diner, and are back in the office on Monday.
Exactly. And Harley managed this brilliantly through scarcity. Demand constantly exceeded supply. Dealers were charging 20% premiums over the sticker price. And people paid it happily.
That's the Rolex strategy. If you can walk into a store and just buy one, nobody wants it.
Harley intentionally didn't ramp up production too fast. They wanted to protect that residual value and the mystique. If everyone has one, it's not special.
Contrast that with Ducati. They couldn't rely on 45-year-old lawyers.
No. Their demographic was younger median age under 30, athletic. Their brand was built on performance and innovation. They win the World Superbike Championship. You buy a Ducati because you want to feel like a pilot, not a pirate.
Pilot, not a pirate. I love that distinction. But that's a tough market, right? Younger people have less money.
Which is why Ducati had to expand. They started pushing into sport touring. trying to get those riders who wanted performance but didn't want to be in a full racing crouch for 3 hours. It was about expanding the niche without losing the soul of the bike.
Okay, so we have the manufacturing, fix outsourcing, and speed. We have the brand distinction lifestyle versus performance. But here's where it gets really interesting. The internet.
This is where Ducati took a risk that Harley simply wouldn't take. And honestly, most companies in 2000 wouldn't take.
Set the scene. It's January 1st, 2000. Y2K has just not happened. The world is breathing a sigh of relief. And Ducati decides to do something crazy. They announce a bike, the MH900E. It's a retro-style beauty. Price tag, €15,000, about 15,000 US. And they say, we are only selling this online.
Think about the context. Buying a book on Amazon was still somewhat novel. Buying a high-performance vehicle sight unseen with a credit card, that was unheard of.
That feels like financial suicide. What if nobody clicks buy?
That was the fear. But the result was the opposite. The entire year's production 2,000 units sold out in 31 minutes.
31 minutes? That is faster than selling out a rock concert.
It was a shock to the industry. But look at the business implication. Their motto became, produce what is already sold.
Think about the cash flow there. Usually a manufacturer buys raw materials, pays workers, builds the bike, ships it to a dealer, and waits 90 days to get paid. Ducati got the money before the bike even existed.
It's a negative working capital cycle. It is the holy grail of business finance. You are funding your operations with your customers' money.
And they didn't stop there. They did it again with the 996R, which sold out in a day, and the S4 Fogarty, which sold out in 3 days. But wait, hold on. If I'm a Ducati dealer and I see the headquarters selling bikes directly to customers online, I'm flipping a table. I'm losing my commission.
You would think so, and that was a huge risk. Channel conflict is the death knell for many manufacturers. If your dealers turn against you, you're dead. But Ducati was clever. They bypassed the dealer for the sale, but they included them in the delivery.
How does that work?
You buy the bike online from Ducati.com, but you have to select a local dealer for pickup. The dealer gets a lower commission, around 5–10%, instead of the usual 12–15%, but they still get the customer walking through the door.
And the dealer didn't have to do any sales work. The customer just appeared.
Exactly. And once they are in the shop, the dealer does the handover. They sell the helmet, the jacket, the service plan. DiBiagio called it the dirty hands work. He said, you need the dirty hands of a mechanic to prepare the bike. You can't download a tune-up.
So they turned the internet into a lead generator rather than a competitor. That is smart.
And it went beyond just sales. Ducati used the web to build a community in a way that was very forward-thinking. They called it the Dutatisti.
I read about this poll they did. They actually used the website to ask strategic questions.
They did. There was a moment where they were debating whether to enter the Grand Prix circuit. That is a massive, multi-million-dollar commitment.
Yeah.
A huge risk. Instead of just deciding in the boardroom, they pulled 4,500 fans online.
And the fans said,
They said, go for it. And Ducati did. They used the customer base as a remote marketing and strategy department. It's a democratization of the brand.
now let's pivot back to Milwaukee. How is Harley handling the World Wide Web? Were they pulling the rubs?
Very differently. For Harley, the internet was a utility. You use it to find a dealer. You use it to look at a parts catalog. You use it to make a wish list, to print out and take to the store.
What's digital brochureware?
Essentially. And there was a massive culture clash. Harley actually refused to host official chat rooms on their site.
Oh, I have the quote here. This is amazing. They said, chat rooms are for people who drive cars. We prefer to chat in the middle of a national park with a few thousand of our friends.
It's a great line, isn't it? It sounds archaic now, but it shows a fundamental resistance to digital community. Harley wanted the community to be physical. The HOG rallies Harley Owners Group, the ride home for the 100th anniversary. They wanted you smelling the exhaust and hearing the rumble, not typing on a keyboard.
To be fair, if your demographic is 45-year-old lawyers in 2001, they probably aren't hanging out in chat rooms as much as the 25-year-old Ducati riders.
That's a valid point. Harley's strategy wasn't wrong. It was just tailored to a different kind of value network.
Yeah.
Their network was physical. Ducati's was becoming digital.
So we have two completely different strategies here. Ducati goes lean, outsourced, digital, and fast. Harley goes heritage, exclusive, physical, and scarce. Who won?
Well, that's the beauty of this case study. They both won.
Let's look at the scorecard.
By 2001, Ducati posted its 5th consecutive year of record profits. They turned the ship around. Their EBITDA earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization was up 10%. They were healthy. They survived.
And Harley.
Harley was a juggernaut. Record revenue and earnings for 16 consecutive years. Their revenue was up nearly 16% in 2001 alone, reaching $3.4 billion.
So Harley saved itself by looking backward. Heritage, exclusivity, the soul of the machine. Ducati saved itself by looking forward, outsourcing, flexibility, digital connection.
It proves there is no single right way to run a manufacturing business. But what stands out to me is how Ducati redefined what a manufacturer is. They realized that in a global economy, you don't need to own the machines to own the market. You need to own the design and the customer relationship.
That brings us to the so what for our listener. We are looking at a case from 20 years ago, but the lesson feels super relevant.
It is. If you are running a business today, you have to ask yourself, what is my engine? What is the one thing I do that nobody else can do? For Ducati, it was design and marketing. For Harley, it was brand heritage.
And everything else.
Everything else is just plumbing. If you aren't the best in the world at it, why are you doing it?
Are you holding on to manufacturing, metaphorically speaking, when you should be focusing on design? Are you trying to build the whole bike when you should just be drawing the blueprints?
That is the key question. And there's one final detail in the case study that I think is worth chewing on.
Yeah.
It's about the future that never quite arrived.
What's that?
Ducati executives at the time had this dream. They talked about mass customization. They imagined a future where a customer goes online, configures a bike with the exact specs, colors, brakes, suspension, basically designing a one-of-one bike. And the factory builds that specific bike just for them.
The ultimate personalized ride, no two bikes alike.
Right. But in 2002, Christopher Spira, their head of investor relations, admitted, "We're probably a long way from here."
It's funny looking back from today. We have configurators now. I can go online and pick my seat color. But true mass customization, where the factory effectively builds a prototype for every single customer.
We still aren't quite there in the automotive world, are we? We have option packages, we have trim levels, but the dream of a completely fluid manufacturing line that responds instantly to a single user's whim, that is still the holy grail. Ducati was dreaming about it 2 decades ago.
Maybe that's the next deep dive, why we still can't just 3D print our own motorcycles in the garage.
I'd listen to that.
Until then, take a look at your own value network. Are you a pilot or a pirate? Thanks for listening.